and I'd like to welcome everybody tonight. I am David Hill. I'm the president of the Shebig Island Historical Society, and I'm going to welcome you to the continuation of our winter lecture series. And I'm going to interrupt myself from time to time to admit people. Mary Holt just came in. Next year, we hope to be back to meeting in person, but in the meantime, we do appreciate this opportunity to reach out to people on the island in person. And as we were talking about a few seconds ago, this is one of the benefits of the pandemic, if you will. Not that there have been many, but this has been one of them. Tonight, we'd like to welcome our friend Earle Shettleworth to tell us about Portland in the after the fire, before, during, and after the fire. I know that Earle will be happy to field questions at the end of this. So if you have questions, please make note of them. And at the end of our discussion, we will talk about them. And I'll recognize you. Raise your hand, use the little thing down at the bottom to raise your hand. I'll recognize you and take you off mute so you'll be able to speak. And I'll try to take questions in the order in which they come to me. As Donna mentioned, our next lecture is going to be on the 12th of April, and she'll be talking about Shebig's summer as a summer resort, which really is quite a story when you think about how things have changed over the years. Now, if we were in the Island Hall, there'd be a donation bucket by the door. So tonight we don't have a door, much less a bucket, but you can still donate. You can still donate to the ShebigHistory.com. And you can find all sorts of Shebig related gift items or make a donation to help your museum carry on. So on with the show. We're welcoming back our good friend Earle Shettleworth, who's a native of Portland and attended Deering High School, where my father went, by the way, Bowdoin College and Boston University. And he was the recipient of honorary degrees from Bowdoin College and the Maine College of Art. He became architectural historian for the Maine Historic Preservation Commission in 1973 and a director in 1976. He retired from that position in 2015. Earle has lectured and written extensively on Maine history and architecture and has served as state historian since 2004. So I'd like to welcome Earle, and I will be happy to put the presentation up on the screen when you're ready.
Well, why don't we just go right ahead, David?
Go right ahead then.
And we're probably going to want to mute everybody too.
Oh yeah, let me do that. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
And if I accidentally mute you, Earle, I will.
I'll raise my hand.
Mute all and current participants. Okay. And you are muted, so I will ask you to unmute. There. And now I'm going to go to share screen, and we're going to start with the Great Fire. There's no sound with this, is there, Earle?
No, just me. I mean, well, there'll be narration, but
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing, David, is okay. So
yeah, I got
yeah.
Doing three things at once here.
Sure, that's okay.
Okay. Now, if I can get to the screen. There we go.
I think that's it. Oh, good. That's good. Yeah, that's very good.
All right. Take it away.
And the only other question I would ask is, as people come in, will they still register on the screen, or is that muted as well?
That's a good question. I don't see them. I don't see my screen.
Huh. Oops, we want to go back. We have to go back.
Yeah.
Let's not worry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we're advancing when we need to.
There we go.
Yeah, there.
I would say let's go for it.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be back with the Shebig Historical Society again this evening. I really enjoyed my time with you both in November and January, and here we are in March. And we're now really at a a critical juncture in Portland's history, something we've been moving toward in the previous lectures, and that is the Great Fire of July 4th, 1866. Bear in mind that, as it is today, Portland was the largest city in Maine in 1866. At that point, there was a population of about 30,000 people, whereas on the peninsula today, there are between 65 and 70,000. Also, that, I guess, includes the Deering area as well. Portland was a very rich, prosperous, active port, commercial and industrial hub for Maine. And I think probably the last thing people expected in the aftermath of the Civil War is that they were going to face this huge crisis and challenge in rebuilding the city. But it happened. The city was celebrating July 4th, 1866, and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, not far from where this photograph of the ruins of Brown Sugar House was taken, at the foot of High and Commercial Streets, there was a small boat shop. And there are a couple different versions about how the boat shop caught fire. One was that it was shavings that were just ignited by sparks, maybe by firecrackers. And the other is that they were ignited by a passing Grand Trunk Railway engine. And you can see in the foreground of this photograph, and some of us are old enough to actually remember the tracks that were on Commercial Street, because actually Commercial Street acted in those days as a railroad connection between railroads coming from the south and the Grand Trunk, which was coming from Canada down through Maine. But in any case, the boat shop fire was quickly put out, or so they thought it was, by around 5 o'clock. But it apparently ignited again and worked its way through some small wooden buildings until it hit this massive industrial building called Brown Sugar House, which was owned by J.B. Brown, the wealthiest man in Portland. It was an 8-story brick structure. You can see to the right in this photograph of its ruins, this huge chimney and a secondary chimney as well, and some of the remains of the walls. We're looking here on Commercial Street up onto Maple Street with the skeletal remains of Brown Sugar House. Once the fire hit the sugar house, it really just expanded greatly. It was really just like the fodder for the fire. And a couple important factors gave play to the fire as well. One was that the winds were coming from west to east, and that fanned the fire forward into the center of the city. And also, at that point, Portland did not have a central water system. And so as a result, the fire department had to rely entirely on private cisterns and wells. And occasionally when fires were near the waterfront, they could put their hoses into the harbor, but it happened that at the critical moment, the tide was out. So the fire got a great deal of momentum and moved from west to east into the center of the peninsula. Next, please. Next slide, please.
Yep, working on it. I had no trouble changing them before. There, okay.
Okay, so now we're in the center of the peninsula, and you can see the ruins here, the massive destruction. We're on Middle Street at the juncture of Middle and Free Streets, and the only building surviving is in the very center of the photograph, and we'll see more views of this as we go on, was a custom house that was built in 1854 on the site of the old post office where Post Office Park is now, between Exchange and corner of Exchange and Middle Streets. One of the interesting things about this photo is this is a few days after the fire, And you can see that there are groups of men actually chipping away at bricks because, of course, the central part of the city was heavily built of brick in those days. And the attempt was to try and salvage a lot of the bricks that had uh, remained from the fire, brick chimneys, brick walls, and so on, and to reuse them along with building with new brick as well. Next, please. Now we are at the foot of 4th Street, and we are looking up Exchange Street to the corner of Middle and Exchange. And you can see in the center the circular facade of that custom house built in 1854. The custom house prided itself when it was constructed, it was a US government building, of being fireproof. It had a steel frame, and it had everything was either steel or iron in the building in terms of its construction, and then it had a stone exterior. But nonetheless, the fire was so ferocious that it burned right through the building, and the superstructure survived, but the interior of the building was destroyed. So it did not prove to be as fireproof as was thought. We'll see it another moment. Moving forward to the next one, please. Now we're a little bit closer up. We're right in the midst of the ruins of Exchange Street on left and right, and the corner in the middle of the photograph is Middle and Exchange Streets. And again, the only building to remain intact, although burned out as a shell, was this US Custom House. Next, please. Here's a close-up, a photograph taken by Marquis F. King, in which we see a close-up of that Exchange and Middle Street building, the Custom House of 1854, shadowed in the foreground by these remaining walls of commercial buildings along Exchange Street. Next, please. The word of the fire, which we'll see burned itself out finally on the slopes of Munjoy Hill on the morning of July 5th. The word of the fire spread very quickly. Of course, in those days, the major form of communication was the telegraph. And very quickly, the news of the disaster was telegraphed all over the Northeast. Very quickly, the illustrated newspapers of the time, primarily Harper's Weekly and Frank Leslie's Weekly in New York, sought photographs from local photographers of the ruins. They were sent to New York, engraved as wood engravings, and then widely published in these newspapers. The lag time was considerable when you consider that the fire occurred on July 4th and July 5th. And if you look at the date in the upper right-hand corner of this wood engraving, says Great Fire in Portland, Post Office and Surrounding Ruins, photo by King, July 28th, 1866. So it takes 24 days for the word to get out in a national magazine. Not the age of our almost instant communication that we experience today. Next, please. Now we're going to get a perspective on before, during, and after the Great Fire. This is a photograph taken in 1865, a year before the fire, and we are in the dome of the City Hall, an older City Hall. We'll see some pictures of what happened to that during the fire, but it was on the site of today's Portland City Hall. And we're looking straight down Exchange Street, the Fore River and the harbor, and what is now South Portland, what was Cape Elizabeth, is in the background. And you can see how densely populated the city was in the center of the peninsula. And interestingly, of course, there was no zoning in those days. And so as a result, um, both the street patterns and the buildings just developed over many decades in a rather haphazard way. And so in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a little house, but in the center, you'll see a big commercial building. It was a very sort of helter-skelter development in the center of the peninsula. And of course, that helped to fan the fire, because in the midst of large brick commercial buildings, which, had they all been that way, might have withstood some of the fire, there were interspersed many of these small, older wooden buildings, which were perfect kindling for the fire. So we're looking, as I say, straight down Exchange from Congress, Middle, and down to 4. And at the left is the back of that custom house where the old post office stood. Next, please. Now we are at the juncture of Middle and Exchange Streets, and we're looking directly down to 4th Street. The ruins on either side are commercial buildings that stood on Exchange Street, the lower half of Exchange Street. The building at the very bottom is a survivor of the fire, the Chadwick Duran block of 1854, which is still to this day standing on 4th Street. And one of the interesting things to keep in mind is that while the fire did sweep through the very heart of the city, it allowed parts of 4th Street, the water side of 4th Street, along with all of Commercial Street, to survive, other than that West End part that we saw at the beginning where the Brown Sugar House was. So if you go to the old port today, you'll see a very interesting combination. Where the ruins are all buildings that were built immediately after the fire. But once you get down onto 4th Street, on the water side of 4th Street, there are a fair number of rather early buildings from about 1800 to 1860, and all of the Commercial Street buildings are from the 1850s and 60s. Next, please. Portland made a very rapid recovery from the Great Fire. And this is a view from the City Hall, looking down that same vantage point of the slide that we saw a couple images ago from 1865. This is now 1875, 10 years later. And the entire downtown is completely rebuilt. It's rebuilt very densely, but for the most part, it's built in brick, because after the fire, the city adopted more stringent laws that really reflect modern zoning, in which if you wanted to build a wooden building in certain districts, you had to get city council approval. And so most of the buildings in what we now call the old port were built of brick and of granite for fireproof purposes. And in addition to that, there was a larger scale of buildings as well. Next, please. Now we're back to the years before the Great Fire. This is about 1865. We are looking up Exchange Street for Middle Street. To the right is that custom house that will dog us all through this lecture. It's a kind of a landmark. And what we're looking at now at the end of the street is the City Hall that stood on the site of the present City Hall. This was a beautiful building built in 1858. It was designed by an architect from Boston named James H. Rand. It was so large and so elaborate because Portland was always angling to retrieve its original designation as the capital of Maine. And so when they built this new city hall at Congress and Myrtle Streets in 1858, they actually included rooms for the House and Senate. And when the building was completed around 1860, they brought the whole legislature down to look at the building to try and convince them to move the capital back to Portland, but nothing doing. Next, please. Now we're looking at that same scene. Exchange Street is at the left, and Lime Street is at the right. And in the background, we're seeing the shell of that beautiful City Hall building that was built in 1858. The wall survived, and this was one of the very few buildings that was reused after the fire. The city had made such an extensive investment. The front of the building was all brownstone. It was brick on the other three walls, and we'll see how the building gets rebuilt. To the left, the slender towers, the twin towers, are on the old Chestnut Street Church. Those no longer are there on the church, but it was a Methodist church built in the 1850s. Most recently, it has been the Grace restaurant. Next, please. Here we have a close-up of that the burnt-out walls of the City Hall at Congress and Myrtle Streets. Next, please. And here, this very eerie photograph of the interior of the remains of the City Hall. This photograph really reminds me of some of the photographs that were taken a year before in Richmond, Virginia, when a large part of Richmond was burned at the end of the Civil War, and also, you know, of some of the burnt out cities in World War II at the end of the war. Next, please. Here we see the rebuilding of the City Hall, which took place between 1866 and 1868. The original stone and brick walls were used. The interior was completely reconstructed, and there was a larger Baroque-style dome, which you can see under construction in this photograph taking place. It's a wonderful photograph in that it shows in the foreground just this rubble that's still there. I mean, this is probably around 1867. This is probably about a year after the fire, but a lot of the rubble is still in the foreground. And note also in the lower left, Dupy's photographs picture gallery. We owe a great deal to these pioneer photographers, both in Portland and from around New England, who came to Portland in the months after the Great Fire to record both the ruins and also the rebuilding of the city. The architect for the rebuilding of the City Hall was Francis H. Fassett. He was born in Bath in 1823. He started practicing architecture in Bath around 1850, came to Portland in 1863, and 3 years later, he was in place to really be the foremost architect for the reconstruction of the city. Next, please. Next, please. Here is a photograph of the completed, restored, rebuilt Portland City Hall at Congress and Myrtle Streets, which was completed in 1868. This building was fated to be destroyed once again in January 24th, 1908 to be exact. There was another City Hall fire. Fortunately, it was focused just on this building, not on the entire downtown. But by the time the fire again ravaged this building in 1908, it was felt that it was just impossible to rebuild once again. There was quite a debate. Some people wanted to reconstruct the building to return it to this appearance again. But others, including John Calvin Stevens, the leading architect in the city, said, no, we really need to clear it away. We need a larger, more up-to-date city hall. And so from 1909 to 1912, the city hall that we now have on this site was constructed. Next, please. Now we're going back to 1865, and we're looking from the dome of that city hall that was built in 1858 and destroyed in the 66 fire and rebuilt. And I show this to you because it shows how densely populated the peninsula was in the years before the fire. To the right of the steeple that we're seeing in the center of this photograph, you can see how closely built all of these small wooden and maybe a few brick-walled houses, but mostly wooden houses are. To the right is the harbor, and in the background to the left is Munjoy Hill. This is the section which is now today Pearl Street, Congress Street, Franklin Arterial, and Federal Street. Next, please. It was this group of buildings, so densely built and primarily wood, that further fanned the fire, gave it fuel as it was moving toward the center of the peninsula on the night of July 4th. And when the fire was over, the city fathers said, you know, in order to avoid another great fire, one of the things we can do, in addition to introducing the quasi-zoning and forcing people to build in certain areas, certain types of buildings, certain materials, we also need to create a fire break in the very center of the peninsula. And so they bought the land where all those houses that we saw a moment ago was, bordered, as I say, by Pearl and Congress and Franklin and Federal. And they created an open park. What a great idea to have a fire break, but to disguise it as a public park that people could enjoy. And here we see the early stages of Lincoln Park, which is the first public park in Portland's history. Initially, the park was named Phoenix Park by the city because of the phoenix was the mythical bird that kept rising from its ashes. And in fact, the phoenix is to this day on the city seal, although if you look at our current phoenix, he looks a little more like an anemic seagull than a phoenix. But anyway, there you are. So this is the nascence, the beginning of Lincoln Park, just where the land is cleared and they're beginning to grow the grass. Next, please. And then 10 years later, this photograph from the City Hall, there we have a park, a beautiful park with these lovely sort of winding paths with cast iron fences all around it, with trees being planted and a fountain in the middle. Just a wonderful civic endeavor, which has survived to this day. And in recent years, there's a group called the Friends of Lincoln Park that have played a major role in restoring the park. To the left is one of the many churches that was built after the Great Fire. This was the Second Parish Church. It was a congregational church. It had originally stood on Middle Street, and then they bought land on Congress Street at Pearl Street in order to build their new building. And by the way, that building, that church was designed by Francis Fassett. Looking to the left, behind the church steeple, is Munjoy Hill, and out in the background is the harbor. The dome at the right, against the harbor in the upper right, is the dome of the roundhouse for the Grand Trunk Railway at India and 4 Streets. Next, please. Now we're looking at a very different angle from what we've been looking at so far. In all of our views, we've been really following the path of the fire from from west to east as it progresses along the peninsula. This photograph is a little different. It was taken from the Custom House at Middle and Exchange Streets. And now we're looking to the west, and we're looking to that portion of the city that was spared by the fire. The building in the very center is still standing today. It is what we knew in our youth as what was called the Lower Hay Building. It's at the corner of Middle and Free Streets. Over at the left, in the upper part of the left, that whole grouping of steeples, of church steeples, those are all in the area of Congress Square, where there were once a whole, literally a congregation of churches. Next, please. Speaking of churches, the fire just narrowly missed taking the beautiful old First Parish Church, which is to this day the oldest church on the peninsula. It's, excuse me, shown in the center of this photograph with its lovely steeple. In the foreground, everything is ruins, and you can see how literally the fire swept right across the street from the First Parish Church, which is now on Congress at the head of Temple Streets. The building immediately to the right of the First Parish Church was also spared. That was the brand new Portland High School, built in 1863, designed by another architect who was active in the Great Fire, George M. Harding. And interestingly, the core of that building is still there. There were expansions at the turn of the century and later around 1920 to the Portland High School, but they were always around the core of that building. And if you look at the back of the present Portland High School, if you go in the little alleyway next to between the Masonic Hall and the First Parish Church, you will actually see some of the facade that you see in this photograph. Next, please. Now we're back toward looking from west to east, and silhouetted against the backdrop of Munjoy Hill and that little speck on the horizon, that little tower on the horizon, center left, is the observatory, the Portland Observatory. But what we're looking at in the foreground is the burned out shell of St. Stephen's Church on Pearl Street, which was an Episcopal church. Next, please. And here, right in the center of the peninsula at the right, again, is that front wall that remains standing, the rest of the church in ruins, St. Stephen. We're right down in the very heart of the peninsula now, Pearl Street, Exchange Street area, and you can just see the extraordinary level of devastation. There were about, as I mentioned, about 30,000 people living on the peninsula. Of those 30,000, about 10,000 people were left homeless, and the fire caused about $12 million worth of damage. It was the worst urban fire in American history up to its time. Sadly, it was quickly eclipsed by the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and the Great Boston Fire of 1872. So our dubious distinction of having the worst urban fire was quickly surpassed. Next, please. Now we have this incredible panoramic view of the peninsula as we move toward Munjoy Hill. And again, you can just see all that's left for the most part are these skeletons of chimneys, almost like a forest of chimneys, and the trees, of course, have all been burnt. Way in the background at the right is Munjoy Hill. It would be North Street up there. Next, please. Now we have arrived at where the fire ended on the morning of July 5th. To the right is Cumberland Avenue, and further to the right are the slopes of Munjoy Hill. The road in the center is Congress Street, and we are in the Portland Observatory, 82 feet above Munjoy Hill, looking now from east to west down into the burnt city. The fire worked its way up along the right, in our photograph, the right side of Congress Street and all into Cumberland Avenue, and then finally burned itself out just below North Street on the slopes of Munjoy Hill. Almost immediately, relief came to the city. The U.S. Army sent by railroad car, sent 1,500 Civil War surplus tents, and what was called Tent City was created on this slope of Munjoy Hill at the left, which was open common ground. That area did not burn. That was actually like a common that people brought their cows, and it was a pleasure ground as well. So that became a place for the victims of the fire to live, and actually some of them had to live in these tents like refugees for several months. The miracle was that the winter of 1866-67 was a very mild winter, probably much like what we've experienced. And so there wasn't the biting cold. People could survive in these conditions. And in addition to that, it allowed for a very rapid rebuilding. This is a photograph taken by a Boston photographer. Next, please. And from this photograph was made a popular lithograph, a popular print. You can see many of the same characteristics that you saw in the photo. Congress Street in the center, Cumberland Avenue to the right, the tent city to the left. There's a little horse-drawn trolley car going down Congress Street. The whole center of the city burned out. And then to the right, a little square brick house with a cupola. That house survived the fire, and it's still there today, right across the street from the observatory. Next, please. Here's a close-up of Tent City. And in the background, center right, is the old Easton Cemetery. And the Easton Cemetery was a place of refuge for many people who fled the fire because they believed, and fortunately rightly so, that because the cemetery was largely just a grassed-in area, that the fire only sort of hit the fringes of it and then moved over toward Congress and Cumberland avenues. So they did survive. To the left is the neighborhood of Newbury Street, Federal Street, that area, and somewhere down in there is the Abyssinian Church, which survived the fire as well. Next, please. Here's a more central view from the observatory. Congress Street is at the right, and the tent city is center and left. And then everything behind it is the burnt out city. Next, please. And now we move over to the right. We're really moving our camera as we go on top of the observatory. And in the foreground is Cumberland Avenue. And then that section right near Back Cove, which of course Back Cove is there in the background, the water. But the big building at the right is the old Cumberland County Jail on Monroe Street. And that section of what we call Bayside today in Portland survived the fire. Next, please. As we've seen in other photographs, a very rapid rebuilding. This is a view from the observatory between 5 and 10 years after the Great Fire. To the left center in the photograph is a large building, the old North School, that is still there today next to the Easton Cemetery. And already in the foreground, you can see on what was the city's common ground, the city-owned ground, already people are beginning to build houses. The city made this land available to buy because of the scarcity and the need for quickly rebuilding houses. And the houses on the right have all been rebuilt, as are many of the buildings in the background. Next, please. And so we end this section of the lecture with this wonderful photograph on Exchange Street right after the Great Fire that really gives us a sense of being there, of a presence. We're right on the sidewalk. Two men on the right are having a conversation. There's the ruined wall of one of the commercial buildings, and way in the background at the right are the towers of the Chestnut Street Church. Now, David, we'll move on to the next group of images.
Okay. Yep. And let's see. This is fantastic, by the way. Really enjoying this. And are we seeing?
We now just need to do the slideshow and from the beginning, so we get the full image on the screen, just like what you did
With the
before.
same one as before?
No. We're fine. We have the right lecture. It's just that we need to we need to get from we need to get into slide mode.
Yeah. Just wondering why that's not working. All right, let me try it again. This is the Great Portland Fire that we want this time, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you just need to click on something on that of those symbols to turn it into a slideshow. Just like what you did before.
Yeah. All right, let me try this again. I apologize, everybody, for the technical difficulties. Great Portland. Okay. And
somewhere up in there, there's a symbol to click on.
Start from current slide.
What's that?
I'm reading the little symbol up here, start from current slide.
Yeah.
And I'm getting this. All right, bear with me, everybody. We'll figure this out. Get rid of this one. And do this one. Share screen.
David, you're not in slideshow, you're in the editing view.
Yeah, you need to be in slideshow mode.
Okay. What are you seeing now? Just my background?
Display views.
We're seeing editing mode. You need to be in the bottom left corner. There's a slideshow. Bottom left corner, there's a thing that says slideshow.
Wait a minute. What I see up here is start from current slide. Start from first slide. There.
Wait a minute.
Did that do it?
There you go. Yes, that's fine. That's fine. The triumph of technology.
Yeah, the shortcomings thereof.
Very good, David. Thank you. So now and then I'll just give you the cue to continue on once we address this one. Great. So now we're going to see some repetition of views, and I'll move quickly over those. But this will give us a little broader view of the history of the Great Fire. We're looking here at a map that we've seen in some of our previous talks in November and January. This is the Falmouth Neck of 1690. And the reason I show this time around is to recall that by the time of 1690, the Portland Peninsula had been destroyed twice in the French and Indian Wars, 1675 and again in 1690. Next, please. And then, of course, in October of 1775, just before the Revolution, Captain Henry Mowat came up with a small fleet of vessels that we see in this primitive engraving in the foreground, and once again leveled the peninsula. Next, please. So when the July 4th fire came, it was literally the fourth destruction of Portland. Here we're looking at a lithograph of the J.B. Brown Sugar House, which I mentioned a few moments ago, was really the building, the massive commercial industrial building that ignited the Great Fire. And this stood at the corner of Maple Street and Commercial Streets, and part of it was on further up into the peninsula. But this is the building that really exploded and moved the fire into the center of the city. Next, please. Here's a different view from what we saw. We're looking from Commercial Street at the center of Maple Street. Again, the ruins of the J.B. Brown Sugar House with the two big chimneys just standing against the sky. Next, please. Here's that view again from the corner of 4 and Exchange Streets, looking up Exchange toward the Custom House at the corner of Middle and Exchange Streets. Next, please. And the close-up view by Marquis F. King, photograph of the Custom House with the ruins of Exchange Street in the foreground. Next, please. Here's our view of the First Parish Church on Congress Street with Portland High School at the right, everything in the foreground in ruins. Next, please. And the view looking from the Custom House at Middle and Exchange Streets, looking up Exchange and Lime Streets to the ruins of the City Hall. Next, please. Here's a close-up of the shell of the City Hall building, where we get a very good view of the stone front and then the brick sidewall on Middle Street extending back, on Myrtle Street, extending back on Myrtle Street. Next, please. And again, this dramatic view of the ruins of the interior of the building. Next, please. And this view of the center of the peninsula with the standing chimneys and the front wall of St. Stephen's Church on Pearl Street at the right. Next, please. Again, this is the front wall that survived the fire of the St. Stephen's Episcopal Church on Pearl Street. Next, please. Now we're looking at a view we haven't seen before, and this is further up the peninsula, further eastward, very dramatic view. We're at the foot of India Street, standing on 4th Street, looking up the entire length of India Street with virtually everything destroyed right up to Congress Street. The shell of that brick house at the right, incredibly, there was enough of it left so that it was reconstructed, and it's still there today. Next, please. And here's that view again as we move to the eastern section of the city with Munjoy Hill and North Street at the upper right. Next, please. This is a view we haven't seen. It's another of the lithographs that was based upon either sketches or photographs immediately after the Great Fire. This is from the vantage point of the Hayes Drugstore building, the lower Hay at Free and Middle Streets. At the left is the little Emery Waterhouse building, which basically survived the fire for the most part and was left when they rebuilt all around it. It was there until it was destroyed by urban renewal in the early 1970s. We're looking down Middle Street at the right, and in the background is Munjoy Hill. Next, please. Here's a close-up of that lithograph from the observatory with Congress Street at the right and the tent city in the foreground and the ruins of the city in the background. Next, please. And again, the photograph we saw a few moments ago of the tent city with the area that escaped the fire in the area of Federal and Newbury Streets in the lower, in the upper right-hand corner, pardon me, upper left-hand corner. And we have the Eastern Cemetery in the background. Next, please. Now, I mentioned before that the leading illustrated weekly newspapers of the period were very interested in telling the nation about the disaster in Portland. And this was the cover of the July 28th issue of Harper's Weekly, a journal of civilization, published in New York City. And these are two very poignant views. The one in the upper half of the front page is a view in the tent city. And then the lower half is the old City Hall, where the Civil War monument now is located in Monument Square. And the old City Hall was converted into a soup kitchen. And this is the crowds of people lining up every day for their meals at the soup kitchen in the middle of Monument Square. Next, please. Here's a close-up. Great fire in Portland, Maine, distributing food to the citizens at the old City Hall. The national and even international response to the fire was rapid and it was generous, and literally tens of thousands of dollars in aid, both in cash and in supplies, poured into Portland. And of course, the railroads were unaffected by the Great Fire. And so the railroads could bring in every imaginable kind of supply, from the army tents to food to clothing to whatever. And the response to Portland's plight was, as I say, a quick and large scale. Next, please. Here we're back to this sequence that I showed you before from the old City Hall building at Congress and Myrtle Streets, looking down into that densely built area that becomes Lincoln Park and the fire break after the fire. Next, please. There's another view showing the beginnings of Lincoln Park, the area that the city consciously purchased so that it would not be rebuilt. Next, please. And again, that same view showing Lincoln Park about 10 years after it was first developed, right after the fire. Next, please. Here's a wonderful view that gives you a feeling for really what a wonderful, charming Victorian park Lincoln Park was in its early days. This is the cast iron fountain that's still there today. And in the background are these lovely Victorian houses on Federal Street, where the Cumberland County Courthouse is now. And you can see some very fashionable folks are standing around the fountain. Next, please. Here, that same view again of the rebuilding of the City Hall. Next, please. And the completed City Hall in 1868, only to be burned again in 1908. Next, please. Now, there were two major federal buildings that came out of the Great Fire. What we need to remember is that that circular-fronted Custom House on the site of what is now Post Office Park at Middle and Exchange Streets was originally a multi-purpose building. It was not only a custom house, but it was also a post office and a U.S. courthouse. So when the decision by the federal government was made right after the fire to take that building down, by that time, Portland's importance as a port, as well as its growth as a city, justified the federal government building two new major federal buildings. And on the site of that custom house at Middle and Exchange Streets, they built this beautiful Roman neoclassical marble post office, which also included the U.S. courts. And this is a view of the building not long before it was torn down for a federal parking lot in 1965. It was one of the first buildings that Greater Portland Landmarks, which was formed in 1964, tried to save. And it really was a cruel irony that was lost, because only a year later, and largely through the efforts of Senator Edmund Muskie, the National Historic Preservation Act was passed. And one of the stipulations was that historic federal buildings were not to be torn down, but were to be reused. And so we lost this, and of course today there's a nice park there. But what a beautiful building this was. It was built between 1866, right after the fire. They began the construction, and it was completed around 1872. Next, please. Fortunately, the fate of the old post office did not befall our magnificent custom house, which still to this day stands almost entirely intact from the 19th century on fronting on 4th Street, and also fronting on Commercial Street. This is the Commercial Street front, and it's a beautiful, what we would call French mansard or Second Empire building, all built of granite, as opposed to the post office which was built of marble. Both of these buildings were designed by the U.S. government architect Alfred B. Mullett. They were designed in Washington, and this one took a little longer to construct, 1866 to 1873. Occasionally there are tours given of the interior of this building, and if you have a chance to go inside the building, it's really just magnificent. There's a great sort of open space in the center, like an atrium. It's a beautiful building, and we're very fortunate. The U.S. government continues to maintain it and to be committed to its preservation. Next, please. Now we're back to 1865. And again, we have this view looking down the densely populated center of the city, Exchange Street, toward the harbor from the old City Hall. Next, please. The ruins of Exchange Street from Middle to 4. Next, please. And the quickly rebuilt Exchange Street around 1875, with all new Victorian brick and stone facaded commercial buildings left and right, now the heart of what we call the Old Port area. And at the very center and end of this photograph, at the end of the street, is the Chadwick Duran block of 1854 that survived the fire. Next, please. Here's a 1970s view of the Old Port area. Many of the buildings built along Middle and Exchange Streets after the Great Fire, the commercial buildings, were very elaborate, most of them architect designed, many of them having beautiful Italianate and French or mansard features. And then, of course, in this view, again, at the very end, you see the very simple Greek Revival style 1850s Chadwick and Duran block on 4th Street. Next, please. Probably the grandest commercial building to be built in the wake of the Great Fire was the Falmouth Hotel, which stood at Middle and Union Streets. The Falmouth Hotel was built by J.B. Brown, who was the wealthiest man in Portland. He paid 1/30 of the taxes of the city and owned large areas of the city, including the Western Promenade. And in the wake of the fire, he announced that he had great confidence in the rebuilding of the commercial heart of the city, and he would demonstrate this by spending $300,000 in building this great hotel. It was designed by Charles A. Alexander, who was an architect that he greatly favored. By that time, Alexander was in New York City. A stone facade, a brick side and back walls. It stood from its opening in 1868 until it was torn down in 1963-64 for the Canal Bank Plaza. It was called the Hotel of 1,000 Banquets because so many of the city's activities took place, and celebrities and presidents stayed here. It was a great landmark for the city. Next, please. There are many beautiful commercial buildings in the Old Port surviving today. This is the Boyd Block of 1867 at the corner of Middle and Exchange Street, designed by George M. Harding. Next, please. This is not the Koran building, but actually the old Casco Bank building with its hollow granite facade, built in 1867 in the Italianate style, designed by Francis H. Fassett. Next, please. Here, probably the most elaborate group of commercial buildings to be built after the Great Fire, the Woodman, Radcliffe, and Thompson blocks at the corner of Pearl and Middle Streets. All three of these buildings still surviving today. Their facades have been beautifully restored. They're adaptively reused. Very high style Victorian commercial buildings. Next, please. Here is a close-up of the Woodman building, built in 1867, designed by George M. Harding. The first story is a series of cast iron arches. Cast iron became very popular in the mid-19th century for doing storefronts, and these arches were cast at the Portland Company. Next, please. And now we see from the other vantage point in the foreground the Thompson block of 1868, the Radcliffe block in the middle, and the Woodman block in the background. Again, probably the most elaborate grouping of commercial buildings in the Victorian period in Maine, all built within 1 year, 1867-68, all designed by George M. Harding. So Portland really made an amazing resurgence in terms of the rebuilding of the heart of the city. Next, please. Here's another very nice building, unfortunately no longer with us, the St. Julian Hotel of 1867 on Middle Street, built as a hotel, designed by an architect who came from the Boston area, Levi P. Newcomb. Torn down for the Canal Plaza in the 1970s. Next, please. Churches were rapidly rebuilt in the center of the city. The Catholic Church had started to build the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. They had the foundation and part of the walls up when the fire struck and destroyed what had been constructed. And so they started again in 1866 and completed the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception in 1869. And of course, it's it's a towering landmark today, particularly as you enter the city along the Franklin Arterial. It's in the Gothic Revival style, designed by the Irish-born architect Patrick Keeley from Brooklyn, who did hundreds of Catholic churches in 19th century America. And it is the seat of the Catholic Bishop of Maine. Next, please. Here's the interior from an old photograph of the Gothic Revival Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. Next, please. This is St. Luke's Episcopal Cathedral on State Street, begun in 1867 and completed in 1877 in the Gothic Revival style, designed by a New York architect named Charles C. Haight. The Episcopal church that we saw frequently in the burned out area in the old photographs, St. Stephen's, really forced a kind of a shift in where Episcopalians worshipped on the peninsula. Some of them came westward, and thus the building of the cathedral. Others went toward Munjoy Hill, and we'll see in a moment St. Paul's Episcopal Church, which was the Eastern Episcopal Church for Portland. But this is a beautiful structure. It was built for the second Episcopal Bishop of Maine, Henry Adams Neely, who came from Trinity Church in New York in 1867. And his arrangement with the Maine Episcopalians was that if he was to be their bishop, they must build him a cathedral. And so indeed they did, although it took about 10 years to build. Next, please. Here's the interior of St. Luke's, which is still very much intact today. Next, please. I mentioned St. Paul's Episcopal Church. This is in the eastern section of the city on Congress Street, fairly near India Street. And this is a beautiful little English-style stone church designed by a British architect who came to Canada and then worked his way down into America, George B. Pelham. And the adjoining Gothic style rectory is, again, just a splendid little building. Next, please. Here's that beautiful stone facaded church, the second parish church that we saw in some of the earlier photographs. This was designed by Francis Fassett about 1868 and took about 7 years to build. I think it was finally dedicated about 1875. Beautiful sort of Romanesque style stone front. The granite came from Hollowell, and the superstructure of the auditorium was brick. This was torn down in the 1960s. Next, please. And here, another beautiful church that was on Congress Street, just a very short distance from the second parish or Payson Memorial Church. This was the first Baptist church designed by Levi P. Newcomb with a beautiful brownstone facade. If you look for it today, you will find an empty lot. Next, please. As we end our journey through the rebuilt Portland, I will just show you a few representative examples of houses. This is a lovely double house on Deering Street designed by Francis Fassett in 1868 for two sea captains, Lewis and Winslow, two very prominent captains. In fact, Winslow was the owner of a great Atlantic fleet, in many ways probably the largest of the Atlantic fleets, 100 vessels, and they shared this double house. It was built in 1868 in the French mansard style. It's all there except for the cupola today. Deering Street became a very fashionable neighborhood after the fire. Many of the houses date from the 1860s and the 1870s as people moved westward into new residential areas. Next, please. Here's another landmark house on Deering Street, corner of Deering and State Street. This is a double house built by a man named Anderson, and the section at the right was then sold to a famous Maine politician, Thomas B. Reed, who was our congressman in the first district for many years, and in the 1890s was the all-powerful Speaker of the House of Representatives. Next, please. Here's a lovely photograph from Cumberland Avenue, looking up the east side of High Street, showing you these very nice Victorian houses built in the 1860s and early 70s after the Great Fire. This is where the Eastland Hotel is now. Next, please. And finally, we've mentioned the important role that J.B. Brown played in rebuilding the commercial part of the city. He was also the owner of most of the land in the western section of the city. About 400 acres comprised the Western Promenade area. And he not only sold those lots to people to rebuild, he had his own bank, and he helped people finance the construction of new homes in the western section of the city. But he also built housing projects, including this Pine Street row of 8 houses that was completed in 1866. And new housing like this was a godsend for people because, of course, so many people had to find new places to live after the Great Fire. Next, please. So we end with this wonderful carved bird, the Portland Phoenix. And the Portland Phoenix was carved in 1866 to go on the top of the Canal Bank building. And he survived well into the 20th century, although we're not quite sure where he is now. There is in the lobby of the old Casco Bank building in Monument Square a Portland Phoenix that we are not quite sure is this Portland Phoenix. So if you see a stray phoenix someday, please let me know. In any case, this was a wonderful carving. It was symbolic of the rebirth of the city after the Great Fire. The motto of Portland is the Latin resurgam, I will rise again. And so 4 times in its history, Portland has risen from its ashes like the mythical bird. Although, as I said a little bit earlier in the show, the mythical bird is looking a bit like a seagull these days. Thanks very much.
All right. Let's see here. Get us all back on track here. That was fantastic, and it makes me actually want to get off the island and go into Portland and
just wear your mask, David.
Yeah, wear a mask and go see these marvels with a whole new appreciation for the history behind them. At this point, I will entertain any questions that people have. Just raise your hand. Use the little thing down at the bottom to raise your hand so I can recognize you. And okay, here's Carla. Yeah, you can unmute yourself.
So my name is Lindsay Clark, and I really appreciate your talk. So I live, I'm very interested in what happened in the India Street neighborhood. I live
Yes.
on Newbury Street, near the corner of, right near the corner of India. The house that I live in, it's a federal style brick building, a duplex. And
oh yes, sure.
What I know about the land is that it was sold in 1827 with no building on it.
Mm-hmm.
It was sold again in 1842 with a building on it.
Mm-hmm.
But the deed of the house says that it's 1870. So you mentioned that you mentioned that building on India Street that was burned down, well, that was burned, but that they rebuilt. And I'm
Right.
wondering, I'm suspecting that that's the story of my house, is that it was that the shell of the brick building survived and that they were able to rebuild. Do you have any insight on what might be the case?
I don't know specifically, but I certainly know the house that you speak of, and it's very distinctive. I mean, it's very much like a sort of late federal double house with those recessed doorways, the arch doorways recessed, very, very like the houses built, say, from about 1815 to 1830 in other parts of the city. Um, you know, I don't know specifically what happened there. We do know, as I just mentioned, that there was that house nearby that was burned out and rebuilt. That possibly could have happened with yours. In other words, the brick wall survived and they've rebuilt. We might know more if we examine the interior woodwork, you know, whether the woodwork did actually go back to the federal period or whether it was Victorian and thus they might have rebuilt. There were a few of these little islands that escaped the fire, in some cases because people were uh, very brave and very vigilant, and they actually protected their buildings, you know, by pouring water on the roofs and pouring water around their buildings and so on. And that was rare, but and the fire was terrible. I mean, it really just swept right through. But I know the house you speak of, and I don't know the specifics, but um, it certainly is an early building, and whether it's a rebuilt from the early building after the fire, I think the woodwork on the inside would tell us the story.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, right.
Yes, Lila. Unmute. There you go.
Thank you. Earle, this has been fascinating. Would you tell us a bit about the history of the Portland Fire Department? How was it organized? Did they have paid firemen at that time? How did they respond? What happened after the fire?
Right. Well, good question about the fire department. Of course, historically, in most main towns and cities in the 18th and 19th century, at least up to the mid 19th century, there were volunteer fire companies. However, I believe that Portland, by the mid 19th century, prior to the Great Fire, it was a combination. They did actually have a municipal fire department, and they had some good firefighting equipment, but they were just overwhelmed by the scale of the fire. And in fact, I mentioned about the railroad still running. Fire equipment was put on railroad cars and brought from places like Biddeford, Saco, and Lewiston, Auburn, and so on to help, you know, fight the fire. But after the fire, I mentioned about the water supply. That was a key issue in the thinking of the city fathers after the fire. In addition to building that fire break in the middle of the city, Lincoln Park, they also created the Portland Water District, which by 1870 had laid the pipes about 25 miles inland to Sebago Lake. And that was the beginning of piping water from Sebago Lake and creating an underground municipal water system for people's homes and buildings. And the idea was that never again were we going to be caught short with not having enough water to fight a fire. And this was true not only in Portland, but in these terrible urban fires that would occur around the country in the 19th century, whether it was Boston or whether it was Chicago or whatever. After these fires occurred, there would be significant advances in protective measures, municipal measures. Municipalities would step up and do things that they might not have done before. You know?
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I saw Donna bringing up a painting or a photograph. If that's so,
Sure.
let's see it.
So this is a survivor of the Portland fire. You can't really see it.
Amazing. Oh, yes.
Can you
Amazing.
see the painting?
Yes, indeed. It's very nice. Yeah.
Okay, so the story goes in my family that my great-grandfather, during the fire, there was a boy running with this painting. He gave him 25 cents for the painting. And it
Yes.
stayed in the family ever since. It had a hole in it, and then they had it fixed. And then it went to my grandmother inherited it, and then my aunt in Connecticut inherited it. Then one of my cousins inherited it, and then her daughters met me at the Royal River Grill one day for lunch, and they said, "We have something for you."
Oh,
And they couldn't. Their mother died at like 98, and there was no way they could throw it away. So guess who they gave it to? But my daughter loves it, and so.
oh, it's a wonderful mid-19th century landscape, Donna.
I know,
Really.
and I can't figure out who did it. But
No, I don't either, really. I mean, it's a distinctive style. It almost has a kind of a Hudson River School style to it, but
yeah, it does.
I can't identify the artist, but what a wonderful relic, really. Yeah.
Yeah, so it made me think of it while we were talking about it. I thought, here's a survivor right here.
Yes, yes. No, and you do from time to time, you find people whose families kept things that were relics of the fire.
Andrew Granell has his hand up.
Yes, sure.
Earle, thank you so much. I believe you began to tell this story in 1960s, 65, or somewhere in that range. I ran across this the other day. It's just gotten better and better and better. And so thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you to say. I enjoy doing it.
There's two questions and they're related.
Sure.
John Bundy Brown is just an immense figure running through a thread, both in the loss of his sugar house as well as the reconstruction. And there needs to be, if there hasn't already been, a biography. And do you know of a biography? And
I don't, and your point is very well taken. And he's a multifaceted individual. I mean, he's involved in the sugar house. He's involved in real estate. He owns ships. He is a banker. He's also Maine's first great art collector as well. His house on the Western Promenade, Bramhall, he actually had a separate art gallery there that people could go see. Anyway, I know that the Maine Historical Society has gotten quite interested in him recently, in part because in recent years, descendants of J.B. Brown and his sons have actually turned over large numbers of the family papers, particularly the letters, the correspondence, and they've been beautifully organized by the Maine Historical Society so that researchers can use them. And I'm hoping that maybe someone will get interested and indeed do what you suggest. There is a very fine talk by the librarian of the Maine Historical Society, Jamie Kingman Rice, that's online. If you go to the Maine Historical Society site, just like you folks are doing on Shebbig Island, they've been having a lecture series on Maine historical topics. And once that topic is completed and they process it, they put it online for people to see. And I was looking at that site just the other day, and this wonderful talk that Jamie gave a month or two ago called The Princes of Portland, the Sons of J.B. Brown. You can go online and find that. And it goes on for an hour or more describing Brown and his three sons and their economic and social impact on Portland.
that's great. Thanks so much. Appreciate
Very good.
this.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments?
Hi, I don't know how to raise my hand over here, but thank you. Thank you, Earle. I have really enjoyed it. I do question the double house. Did he just do the one, Francis, on Deering Street?
Oh, no, he did a number of the Deering Street houses. Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
And when I send you the the booklet that I will. It's actually set up, it's cross-indexed in 3 ways. His buildings in Portland chronologically, by address, and also by style, I think. So you'll be able to figure out Deering Street. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Well, and so nice to have met you, even though we're 3,000 miles away.
Well, I have seen your name in various and sundry things when I start working on family stuff, and it's wow, woohoo! This is
Great.
kind of exciting. And again, I thank you very much. I look forward to the booklet.
We'll get it out to you in the next day or so.
All
Okay,
right,
thanks.
I'm not sure who Salas is.
Oh, me, that's me. Sue, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, fine.
Oh, okay. Earl, I'm taking you out of Portland a little bit. Is there any proof that Francis Fassett designed the Mallet Hall in Pownell, Maine?
Oh, yes. It was done by, you see, he both practiced alone. He had an extraordinarily long career.
Right.
He started as a carpenter in Bath when he was 18, and then he was very ambitious. He went to Boston and New York and learned architecture in the offices of architects there. And they returned to Bath, and he set up his architectural practice about 1850. And then he came to Portland in 1863. And then after the Great Fire, he took in his son as a partner. But then the son went west for a while. And so as a result, he got a series of other partners to help him. John Calvin Stevens was his partner from 1880 to 84. And then from 84 to, or 85, no, 86 to 1891, he had a man named Frederick Thompson as his partner.
Yes.
I believe that Fassett and Thompson did the Mallet Hall. Yes, in
Is
Pownell.
there any proof of that?
Yes, yeah. I think it's in some of the period. I think it's in some of the period newspaper articles that I've found.
What
Yeah.
about Freeport? Did he do any of the buildings in Freeport?
Oh yes. You see, Mallet, was the young man who,
Right.
who you know about him, who
Yes.
inherited his uncle's fortune, and Mallet was very involved in. He built a big house for himself. He built quite a few little cottages for his workers, many of which are still standing on side streets in Freeport. He built a shoe factory, and so on. All of those buildings, the little office building for the shoe factory, the brick building that is now part of a commercial complex in downtown Freeport, all of those buildings that Mallet did were designed by Fassett and Thompson.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Please raise your hand by clicking on the bottom where that little hand is. And seeing none, I think we'll
adjourn.
we'll bid
John
Earle
Painter
a-
had his hand up.
Who did?
Oh,
John Painter.
John. Yeah.
Okay, go right ahead.
Hi, Earl. It's great to see you again.
Hi, John. How are you doing in the pandemic?
Hey, the same as everybody else. We're all in disguise when we're in public, I guess.
Right.
I've heard this lecture before, and you just keep adding to it. And as others have said, it just gets better and better.
Wow.
And anyway, I'm interested in the science of why did the fire stop? Why did it burn out? I'm wondering if it was a change in the weather or that common ground where the tent city was. Maybe it was a fire break. Do you know anything about that?
I think more than anything else, John, it hit a fairly large open stretch on the slopes of Munjoy Hill to the, if we're facing eastward. You know, we're on Congress Street, we're facing eastward. On the right-hand side of Congress Street is the observatory. And then there's that little area of land between Congress Street and Commercial Street. Not Commercial Street, Cumberland Avenue. And so as a result, that land up there on the left-hand side of, or the north side of Cumberland Avenue, going up to North Street, that was a pretty open, undeveloped stretch. And I think that that's where the fire finally just burned itself out on the morning of July 5th.
And the wind died.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Anybody else? Either raise your hand or just speak up. I can't see everybody on the list here. We still have 25 people, well, 25 screens tuned in, probably many more people than that, 2 or 3 per screen. But if I don't hear anybody say boo, I'm gonna.
I'd just like to tell Earle how often I think of your mom. She was my English teacher at Deering, and I often think of her. Well, so I just, every time I hear you speak, I think how proud she would be of you.
Wow, that's very kind of you to say, Vicki. Thank you very much.
And that's a very nice note to close on.
Indeed.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Earle, and we hope to have you back again. We're going to go back and look at that list that you gave us and see what other topics we can have later on.
Well, I'm always happy to come to Shebbig Island, even if virtually.
Will your sister make it this summer?
I'm not sure. I've talked to her fairly recently. I think it's still up in the air.
Whether she can
of course,
get
there's a whole question about, you know, whether she can travel from Canada, you know.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, tell her we miss her.
Well, I know she'll appreciate that. It's very thoughtful.
Well, thank you everybody for attending tonight, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and stay tuned for our next meeting in this series. And,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.